Hey Marco, we're going to try to make a video for you of how this thing works. My selfie camera is not working, so forgive me if I'm not aiming this thing right, but let me get this started for you. So first thing is I have a key here. I'm going to leave this with these guys here. This is essentially a lockout, so it's unlocked right now. If you were to turn it this way, it's locked. If it's locked, you can't turn it on. This is the on button here. Nothing will engage. It's sort of a safety feature. If you have it unlocked, it's not actually on, it's just you're able to start it whenever you like. So this is the on button. You'll know it's on. It's have that little lit LED there. I'm going to turn off for a second and let you see what else is going on here. So this is more or less the electronics box, the batteries inside, all your electrical fuses, whatnot. Underneath here, if we can see, there's two buttons. This front one is your lights, and this rear one is a voltmeter. So if I press in the voltmeter here, it'll tell you what voltage your battery is at. That's independent of the on-off, so you can check that whenever you want. If you see that though, just turn it off so you know, so you're not using any battery power while it's off. This under here is a USB port, so you can plug in any USB device and have it powered up off the battery of the bike. Okay, so with the bike on, you can turn it on. If for some reason, let's say that's not turning on, make sure your key's unlocked. Check this for your battery power. So that's at 13.3, that's fully charged. If it's any lower than 10 volts, even if it's at 10 volts, it needs to be charged. I'd say anything lower than 12.5, it needs to be charged, but keep an eye on that. It should be good sitting, there's no drain on it, but check that before you start it up. If you're having any issues, you can always check that. You want it to be between 12.5 and 13.5 volts. So I'll turn that off. So this basically powers the bike. Everything's on now. If you want your front lights on, you're gonna press this front button down here, and that'll turn on your headlights. And off. These batteries, this is a lithium ion battery. I'm gonna turn this off. It's a lithium ion battery that's in there. It's a great battery, it's really small, it's very powerful, but you can't leave it on. It'll drain quickly, and if it gets too low, it's gonna damage the battery. If for some reason you need to charge the battery, this lead here that comes into the USB port, it's just behind the USB. You just unplug this. So you can see there's two leads. You unplug it. The one that's going into the harness up here, you can plug in a battery tender. This is a pretty standard connection for most battery tenders. So you can just plug that in and plug it into an outlet, and that'll charge your battery. The tender should have a voltage reading on it to let you know when it's charged, but if you want to check it, you can just press the voltmeter that's built into the bike. Okay, so I'm going to plug this back in. Apologize for my one-handed operation here. Okay, so bike's on. That just means that you're powered up. You want to make sure your fuel is on, so that's this guy here. If that's down, that's fuel on. If it's up, the fuel is cut off to the carburetors. You always want that to be on when you're driving, and definitely turn it off when you're parked. This new suspension on this makes the bike a little bit higher, so it leans over just a little bit more than stock. So the fuel that's in the bottom of these carburetors, if it's leaned over too much, will kind of come up a little bit, and it may leak. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but just as a safety, I would leave this off 90 degrees. If you want it on, it's going to be down in line with the hose. So make sure that's on before you start it. This is the starter button here. Let me tell you what all these functions are before I start the bike so you can hear me. Okay, so if you're on the bike, you've got 2 buttons on your right and 2 buttons on your left. So the top button on the right is the starter. The bottom one is your turn signal. So if you hold this in, get off here so I can show you. If you hold in your right button, your turn signals start flashing. You have one on the front and one on the rear built in. So same on the left, with your left hand, the bottom button, you press it and hold it in. You've got your turn signal on the bar end and turn signal in the rear. The top button on the left hand side is your horn. And then, like I said, top button here is your starter. So let's see if we can start this up. I just put some gas in it after I finished transporting it. Turn the bike off. Turn it off there. Okay, so you're gonna want to, this is the choke here. If this is, most likely it's running fairly rich the way it's set up, and it should be okay, especially in California, to just leave this down like this. If it's up, that means your choke is on, which means it's restricting the airflow into the carburetors. If for some reason it's really cold, or you haven't started it in a long time, you're having a hard time starting it, you can put this up in the choke position, and that'll just give it a rich mixture to start out with. It should help it start it under cold conditions. If it's kind of a nice day like today, I would just leave that down, try to start it like that. If you're having troubles, you can put it halfway up, and it should start up fine. I mean, that just started up pretty easily and hasn't been started in about a week. Okay, so we have, once again, your horn here, turn signals here, starter button on top, and right turn signal on the right hand side. On off button here when the bike's unlocked. So as long as this is unlocked, that's an electronic lockout. If that's unlocked, everything's functional. So you can leave that on. If that LED is on, that means your bike is on. If you leave that on and the bike's not running, the battery will drain and you'll have some problems. So make sure that's off whenever you leave the bike. And again, under here, you've got a voltmeter and you have headlights. So if that's on, when the bike is on, you'll have headlights. It won't turn on unless the bike is activated, so you don't have to worry about leaving that on as long as this is off. So on, off. Okay, everything else is pretty much set. There's 2 little issues here. The last test run we did, I didn't have this tightened down enough. There's a cover that goes here and that got lost, so I'll have to find a replacement for you. The charging regulator that was the last thing we ordered that you had sent to me, that's installed, so everything's charging properly, but this oil line down here I wasn't able to get. I think you missed the link to it in the email. So there's just a very slight leak here, and it only happens when the bike is running. I put a new seal in it when the bike went back together, but I think the hose itself has some kind of damage that's causing it to leak. So that was on the email I sent you. It's pretty detailed. There's some links to active links at the time that were for replacements. If you want to get back in touch with me later, if it becomes a bigger issue, then we can deal with it later. The other thing that was in the email was a license plate bracket. So the easiest way to do that is on this axle here, we can mount a bracket, and that just holds your license plate. It's pretty easy to do. There's some links on that email that I sent you that have some pretty affordable ones, and there's lots of options out there depending on what you like. So we have your tail light here, that's fully functional for front and rear brake. If for some reason you want to kickstart it, you can. It's the same as it was before we modified it, so it should be fine, ready to go if you want to do that, but the electric start works perfectly. Sometimes if you're riding, and that's why they keep the kickstart on this bike, if for some reason the battery's a little low, maybe you left a button on or left the lights on or something, and you have just enough power in the battery to start it with a kickstart, not with the electric start, you should try to use the kickstart to save the battery, and that'll kick it over without using any battery power, and once it starts it'll charge itself, so you should be good. What else do we have? I think that's it. I'm dropping it off here at the Redwood office. They were talking about leaving it outside. I'm convincing them that it doesn't leak, so hopefully they'll leave it inside. This is leather. It's got a little bit of, I forget the oil that she put on it, but it's got some kind of protection, but it can't be left outside, or the any rainwater and stuff will damage it, so you want to keep that protected. You know, hopefully I'm not missing anything. I think you're good to go. Oh, the gas tank. So this is how you fill it up. You got to push this down, turn it until it pops up, and then once it pops up, you can grab it, twist it, and pull it out. Same going in. Turn it until it feel a little bit of resistance. Don't try to over tighten it at this point because it's pretty delicate. This is actually the second one. I replaced the first one because it had the same issue. If you really crank on this while it's up, it'll damage the bottom of it. So once that's just tight enough, you can push that down, turn it quarter turn until you hear that click, and then it's good to go. And that should be it. There's a really common problem with these bikes, and again, because of the lean angle of this, sometimes these guys will leak down here. Those are overflow tubes for if the fuel in this bowl gets too high, it'll come out of here. Especially if it hasn't been ridden for a while. If you turn this on and it starts to leak out